There's a phrase that's pretty common, and it's to educate the whole child. You need to start with social and emotional learning. I have a little kind of iteration on that, which is to educate all children, we need to start with SEL. And so there's been quite a movement across the last half of decade in looking at whole child development and really making a focus and emphasis on student social emotional health and the larger constituents of competencies that we would support in growth through school socialization experiences. Yet there's only recently been attention being paid to all of the students in the school community in that regard. And so when we think about the whole child, we want to make sure that we're not unintentionally or intentionally excluding our children and our learners who may fall in the margins of those different types of strategies and studies and evaluations and ways of thinking about whole child. And let me unpack that for a little bit. So many times when I talk about my research and talk about students with learning differences within social emotional learning and the importance of thinking about intersectionality within this work, I met with researchers who talk about it as a tier 2 or a tier 3 intervention, meaning that, yes, we agree that this is important, but we're not talking about those kids. So when we think about accessibility within emotions, and within social emotional learning, I often meet very well-intentioned researchers and practitioners who will say things like, we are attending to the physical or cognitive accessibility of our particular lesson or classroom or routine. Or they will say that it is relative to a tier 2 or tier 3 intervention for where a student is pulled out during a given time. And that's where they're getting the extra supports that are necessary to help to support their learning and growth. However, that fails to account for the emotional accessibility of the lessons that they're engaging in. And we could talk about that from within SEL or across academic domains. Because if a student does not feel safe in that classroom and they do not see themselves represented in the ways in which emotion or other domains, right, are being taught to them, they're not going to be able to attend, right? And in many cases, they can actually be being marginalized by the ways in which the instruction is occurring. To use an example, you may have a very well-intentioned teacher who will mistakenly share with their students that there is a right way to be feeling right now and be dismissive or not validate the full range of emotions that a student is having, just because potentially most of their class may not feel, let's say, anxious about a given activity, or most of the class may see themselves or feel reflected in the examples that are being used about a particular induction of an emotion or experience. But for your students who are regularly not represented and not validated, or being told that the way they're feeling is not the way that they should be, that lack of validation is actually an exclusionary practice, right, in the classroom. That can decrease their likelihood of attending an instruction. And so I'm talking about that for when we think about learning differences. I use a very broad frame because that terminology can refer to students with a broad array of specific learning disabilities, undiagnosed, right? Students with histories of trauma or poverty, students who are linguistically, sexually, culturally diverse in their classroom, who may experience these implicit biases and lack of affirmations in a wide variety of ways.
For more information about social and emotional learning, please visit readingrockets.org. This project was made possible by a partnership between the National Education Association and WETA.